Well, it says we're live. Hello, hello. It's Tuesday. It's 4 o'clock Pacific, 5 o'clock here in Costa Rica, 7 o'clock on the East Coast, midnight in Dublin, 1 a.m. London, Rome, most of Europe, 8:30 and 9:30 a.m. Wednesday morning in Australia. And wait a minute, let me see if I've got this now. 11:30 a.m. Wednesday morning in New Zealand. I hope I've got that right. Somebody will let me know. I always get New Zealand wrong. I'm sorry, I don't quite have that ingrained yet. And it's Facebook Live. And it's really nice to be with you guys again. And we have a great guest today. Our guest is Dr. Aimie Apigian. Am I saying that correctly?
Apigian.
Apigian. Dr. Aimie Apigian. And let me just tell you a little about her. I'm going to read it to make sure I get it right for everybody. Dr. Aimie Apigian is a double board-certified physician in preventive and addiction medicine. She graduated from Loma Linda University in 2010 with her medical degree. And by the way, if I were going to medical school today, if I was not smart enough to want to go to Harvard or Yale, if my brain wasn't quite at that level, I'd want to go to Loma Linda. Not that they're second tier, but it is the top school to have a comprehensive overview in your education about comprehensive holistic medicine during your education. It is the go-to place. So there's something about Harvard and about Yale and all of that where they're really well-trained, but they don't know diddly about comprehensive healthcare. Well, they're starting to learn. I should back off on that a little bit. But Loma Linda is, in my opinion, if you want to go to medical school, it's the go-to place to go. And Dr. Aimie graduated from Loma Linda, which, by the way, Loma Linda is in the only blue zone in the United States.
This is true.
For those of you that don't know about blue zones, it is the go-to book. If you want to read one book on how to live a long and fruitful and productive, healthy life, the book is called The Blue Zones. And many of our followers have read that book. And the dynamic of how that book got published was the researchers were blown away when they found that, there's these places in the world where a large percentage of the people live into their 80, 90, over 100, and they're not on any medications and they're functioning well. The rancher is still walking up the mountain at 87 years old, chasing his sheep, and the scientists who are in their early 50s can't keep up with them. The guy's 87. And there are places like that, pockets in the world, Okinawa, Sardinia, Costa Rica.
I was going to say, you guys have a place in Costa Rica. You've got a blue zone in Costa Rica.
Yes, we do. And we are in the blue zone.
There you go.
Thank you. But they found that there was a blue zone in Loma Linda, California,
California,
just outside of LA. And it's like, what? And the researchers, what is this? And so they reframed how they thought about what is it that has such a large percentage of people living a healthy, vibrant, older life, in their senior years, that they're not relegated to the nursing home at 65 or something like that. And it was Loma Linda. And it's because the people in Loma Linda, it's the center, used to be, of the Seventh-day Adventists. And those folks have a way of thinking about life, a way of thinking about food selections that contributes to this overwhelming influence of long, vital, healthy lives. So that's the blue zone. So that's the medical school that Dr. Aimie graduated from. So this gal is already on the path of functional medicine, comprehensive medicine, integrative medicine, because of her training. So, and I need to finish the rest about her. So having personal experience in foster parenting, adopting, and then with her own health crash, she has discovered that none of us are spared from negative life experiences that get stored in our body. In addition to her addiction medicine work and private concierge medical practice for driven individuals, she is the founder and CEO of Trauma Healing Accelerated, an LLC dedicated to providing education and programs for those wanting to understand the know-how to strategically address the effects of stored trauma and emotions in the body for the next level of aliveness in us all. So, Dr. Aimie, welcome. It's really great to have you here.
Dr. Tom, it is always an honor. I love your work. You have made such a personal difference in my health and my journey. So it really is an honor to be here with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So let's start off with, why did you choose Loma Linda?
Yeah, I was going to say, where do you want to start with that? So my story is I grew up Seventh-day Adventist. And my grandfather was one of the big evangelists in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. He actually was born in Armenia, and as a young boy went through the Death March. So the Turks came in. Many people may not know this history of that side of the world, but the Turks came in, and lots of politics and religious stuff, right? But they tried to wipe out the Armenian people, and so they took them on a death march. And his grandfather, grandmother were murdered on that death march. His father, sister, and mother, all four of them did get to the end of that death march, where the Turks brought them into this place that was surrounded by mountains, so no one could escape, and they were going to come in and massacre them the next morning. They crawled out on their bellies in the night, dug holes in the sand, and the cavalry came over them, actually hit his mom on the neck, but passed over them, and they were able to escape alive. They got back and they took a boat over to San Francisco. So here he arrived. He was 18 at the time, arrived in San Francisco, became an evangelist, a very strong, very passionate evangelist, built many churches for the denomination. And so I grew up very, very much in that whole culture of the Seventh-day Adventist. So when I was applying for medical school, that was one of the places that was on my list, and I'm very glad that I got accepted. Very glad that I went there. I became very, very close with many people there. In fact, just this last weekend, I was up at the ranch, up at the house of the president of Loma Linda, and he is still that very same person that you described, where now he's well into his 70s. I won't give his age away. He's been trying to retire for a long time and hasn't been able to, so he's still president of the Loma Linda Health System. And he is still climbing a mountain every single morning before he goes into work.
Wow.
So it's such an amazing thing to consider when you think of all the toxins that are around Los Angeles. And yet here you have this pocket of a blue zone in the midst of all of that. So they must be doing something right. And the motto for Loma Linda Health Systems is to make man whole. And so it very much, that's the intent, is to really see a person as the whole person, their emotional, their spiritual, their physical well-being, and not separate that.
So you are a person, some people grow up, I grew up in a combination Italian-Irish family.
Okay.
And so actually it was Irish, Italian, and Armenian.
Oh, really? I did not know that, Dr. Tom.
Armenian. We're cousins somewhere.
We must be related far back. Yes.
That's right. That's right. And in our family, it was eat your vegetables and eat your pasta.
Yeah. Yep.
It was just part of the nature of things. In your family, you were born and raised with an awareness of trauma that was just part of the DNA of what can happen in life. And what's the opposite of that? So I can't think of anyone who would be more qualified to address this topic than you, which is really great. I'm glad that you're here because it's in your bones, it's in your nerves, it's in your system. The memory of all of that from birth for you must always have been there to some degree. So that's really fabulous. So one of the things I do, Dr. Aimie, is I always give a shout out to people who are here. And awesome. So let me start with Connie says, hey, Dr. Tom, so happy to be here from sunny North Carolina and warm beaches. Way to go, Connie, it's summertime. Gwendolyn's here from New Zealand. It's 11 a.m. Oh, I'm sorry. So if it's 5 o'clock here and it's 11 a.m. there, okay. So it's 30 hours ahead. All right, I'm going to get this, Gwendolyn. One of these times I will. Dawn says, Tom, it's been forever since I watched you live. I no longer live in Japan, now in Texas. Hey, Dawn Kitty Wool. Nice to see you're back again. Thank you. Dorada's here from New York. Laura, our Laura at theDr.com is here from Southern Oregon. Hey, Laura. Helen says, hello, Dr. Tom. Greetings from Koh Samui Island. I moved away from a toxic environment. Way to go, Helen. Way to go. Koh Samui Island. I've not heard of that. So I'm glad you're here. Thank you so much. Connie says, your son is so adorable. I just love it when he's on here with you. Oh, thank you, Connie. Well, we talked about, all right. Since you asked, I was showing this to Dr. Aimie beforehand. So this is our son 2 hours ago, and I hope it comes through. Let me try here and we'll see. Oh, I turned the volume down. I turned the volume down for it. So that's what we are blessed with every day. We're so grateful to have this opportunity to be isolated at home during this COVID time and really spend 24/7 with our son during these developing times. And every day is different. Today, for the first time, he's been working on trying to sit up straight on his own. Now he sits up and he can lift his chest and hold himself up for 10 seconds. Then he starts to rock a little bit and he starts to go over. But he's up for the first time. And tomorrow it'll be something different. You know, and I'm seeing it every day. And my first time around with my children, I didn't get to see that because I was busy starting a practice, right? And I'd come home at night and see them for an hour before they go to bed. I mean, it was very different fathering back then. This time I'm here 24/7, and I'm very grateful to my wife that she includes me in when I'm trying to work, and all of a sudden I hear, Daddy, and I turn around and there he is. It's, oh, so we're very grateful. I tell you that because he's changing every day. We change every day. And the geek term for it is plasticity. How available are we to adapt to our environment? And it's called neuronal plasticity. And it's our brains and how easy do we adapt? So Dr. Aimie, let's just dive in. And
I love it.
How important is neuronal plasticity when someone is dealing with a traumatic event in their history?
It's what becomes the driving force for their physical, mental, and emotional health. Absolutely everything in their life is driven unconsciously, subconsciously by what has become our nervous system. And so when we look at what are the ways in which we have adapted to our life experiences in the past, or like sometimes kind of you were mentioning, even sometimes generational trauma, right? And how that's kind of been passed down. And there's all these things about epigenetics that we can geek out about, you know, trauma and epigenetics. And it's really quite fascinating. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to how is your nervous system wired? And your nervous system is your internal program for safety versus danger, safety and survival. And so if you are wired for naturally feeling like your baby right now, right? Happy, secure, safe, that's a very different wiring than a person who has this baseline sense of fear and danger and insecurity. You're always going to be looking for what might go wrong, what could go wrong, rather than being able to actually enjoy what is going right now in your life.
Now, may I interrupt here?
You can always interrupt, Dr. Tom.
As I'm hearing you, my brain, I know what my brain is doing, and I can only imagine what for some of our listeners, their brain is doing. My brain is saying, oh, well, I'm deficient. I'm not normal. Because, you know, I grew up in Detroit, on the streets of Detroit. It was a different life. And when I walk down the street in the city, I'm always looking at the alley up ahead or a doorway, or I always kind of turn my head to make sure there's no one coming up behind us. I always do that. So, you know, I don't have the geo mindset as my hard wiring. That has never gone away. It's always there for my survival, my protection. So for people who have a similar thought in their mind that, you know, there's something wrong with them, how do you address that?
So I look at the 3 states of the nervous system, and I start to see, map out and track how much of the day do they spend in one of the, either the stress or the survival state. Because if they're in one of those states most of the day, we've got some work to do, Dr. Tom, because that's going to be driving their health, their life, and they're going to be basing all of their decisions really from a place of insecurity and fear, just because that's the state of their biology in that moment.
It's survival.
Exactly. And again, like you're saying, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with those of us who that's been our pattern. That's how our body has adapted to what was our life. And so the question that we get to ask now is that still serving me? Or am I in a different environment now that I can adapt and help it adapt to my present life where I am safe? And that's where people get stuck, because once we've had those adaptations, it's not just our psychology. Like many people want to think, oh, you know, like my childhood, my trauma, my past, it's made me think a certain way. And so I just need to change the way I think. There is a role for that, right? And I'm not negating that. However, it has actually become our biology because it has wired our nervous system. And we can see that very clearly when we look at the 3 states of the nervous system and start to track and map out their day. And I can see, are you, do you have these trauma patterns that I say, or are you living above those trauma patterns and not reacting? And so when we look at it in that way, we see that once a person is in a new environment, their nervous system will stay stuck if it's already had these chronic effects to the biology, things that you talk about, right? Inflammation. There is nothing more that will keep a nervous system stuck in cell danger response and survival mode than inflammation, neuroinflammation. Right. And so we start to have to look at what is keeping my nervous system stuck in these either the stress or the survival state. And
before we go there, which is really important. The reason I brought up that Gio can sit up today and hold himself up for a little bit, rocks a little, but his abdominals are keeping him straight, and he lifts his chest up with pride, and then he falls over. But tomorrow he'll be able to hold himself a little bit more. And then the next day, a little bit more. That, as Dr. Aimie started off talking about epigenetics, and we could geek out on epigenetics, what that term means. See, your genes, the genes of survival, are wired to be on most of the time for people who are suffering from a traumatic history. Those survival genes, your adrenal glands, and the fight, flight, or fright, those genes are turned on most of the time. Now, genes don't turn on and turn off. Genes operate on a dimmer switch. And our goal is to dim down the genes of stress and trauma. They'll never go away. It's in my wiring. I'm always going to look at, as we're walking past an alley, you know, I'm always going to be looking. They never go away. But if we can dim down the dominant messages of the activity of those nerves and ramp up the genes of anti-inflammation, a little calmer breathing, then you've got a shot. That 6 months from now, you're a different person. But it doesn't change overnight. It's these baby steps. Gio will try to sit up a little more tomorrow, and he'll make it. And the next day, a little bit more. And that's exactly what it is for all of us when we're dealing with some type of history that is dominating our operating system. You want to change the operating system, you don't turn it off, you just dim it down. So Dr. Aimie, in terms of dimming down that operating system that keeps us stressed, how do we start to think about that?
Like you said, we need to approach it gently because this is our survival system. And so it has been programmed to believe and to operate in the world that it is doing a very important job to protect us. And just like my adopted son, right? I adopted him from the foster care system. And I thought that once he was in my home, once he felt my love, Dr. Tom, that he would be fine. He would be loving. He would be happy, right? And that was not what happened. And in fact, the more that I loved him, the more that I tried to get close to him, the more he reacted in such a strong way of get away from me. I can't trust you. And so his wiring was not being, neuroplastic enough in that time to be able to adapt to his new environment. It was already stuck.
And how old was he? How old?
4. He was 4 when I got him, but he had had a very, very traumatic 4 years of life. He did. And so when I'm working with a nervous system, I think of it as a tree, and I live near San Diego. So, relatively near the beach. You probably see this stuff in Costa Rica all the time, but you'll go to the beach and because of the wind that will come off of the ocean, you'll see these trees that are bent. They have adapted, yes. Right? They have adapted to their environment.
Torrey pines.
Yes, exactly. Now, if you want that tree to start moving and growing upward, what are you going to do? You can't go over to it and just push it, bend it, shove it, and expect it to grow up. It's going to break on you. It's going to snap. That's the same thing with our nervous system. We have to rewire it in a gentle way, redirecting it. So putting up all kinds of support, all kinds of props in order to help.
The fence to block the wind.
Yes. That's what our nervous system needs. And so it's a matter of both the biology piece and addressing the inflammation, the source of the inflammation, knowing that it's also a chicken and egg thing because stored trauma will cause inflammation, right? But either way, we've got to address the inflammation. We've got to address toxins. We've got to address mold or Lyme or whatever it is for that particular person. And sometimes it is methylation as well. Like there's so many, a list of things that I have of, hey, these are the top things that will keep people stuck. And we start going through them. Like, what would be the top priority for you? What would be the thing that seems to be telling us it's the most predominant that's keeping your nervous system stuck? And then at the same time, we're doing actual rewiring of the nervous system. I use somatic experiencing since that's what I am mostly trained in. I know that seems weird that as a medical physician, I am trained in trauma therapy, but when I saw what it was doing to people, I knew that I had come across gold. And so I went through a 3-year training to learn what it is that they are doing with the nervous system. It's profound. And they've had tremendous success with even horrible cases of PTSD. And so it's actually being able to rewire the nervous system in the moment and do that gentle redirecting so that when you're walking down the street and you see an alley, yes, your initial thought is still going to be, oh, what's there? Is it safe? But then that's it. Like your system can see, yes, it's safe, and it can shift back down to parasympathetic. Whereas someone who has not done this work is still going to stay hypervigilant. Well, I don't know. I don't see it right now, but it doesn't mean that it's not there. And they're not really able to shift back into parasympathetic. And so what I see is that most people live and go back and forth between stressed and sympathetic and overwhelm and what we call the chronic freeze state. And they're actually two very different biological states. One is a very high energy, adrenaline, cortisol, that very high energy, you're sweating, your heart is beating fast, very high energy. And then the freeze, we talk about the polyvagal theory and Stephen Porges' work with understanding that there's this 2 nuclei of the vagus nerve, and you want the ventral one activated because that's your parasympathetic, but you have this dorsal nucleus that will actually signal to your whole body, the threat is too big and we're actually going to shut down the whole system. Our digestive system shuts down. Our adrenal glands shuts down. Everything shuts down in order to conserve energy. And so we feel this collapse. We feel it's the shame posture, right? So we feel the heaviness, we feel the exhaustion, we feel burnt out, we feel depressed. This is where chronic fatigue, chronic pain, fibromyalgia, all of these conditions are indicative of this chronic freeze state that's part of the survival system. I'm throwing a lot at you, Dr. Tom.
No, you're great. You're great. We're on a roll here. And what I wanted to point out, when those nerves get activated for survival, and they slow everything down, and we go into that, as you refer to, the shame state.
Yep.
There's no discussion.
No.
There's no, well, wait a minute, now it's not that bad. Let's keep our heart rate good and let's breathe deeply. No. The automatic survival mode kicks in, and it overpowers everything.
Yes, and this is where our limbic system in our brain takes over the logic. Now, we will still have thoughts and we'll think, wow, am I having these thoughts? But it really is, no, like you are just in a survival biological state right now. And this is everything that's part of that. It's these thoughts of, it's too much. This is overwhelming. I'm done. I don't care what happens anymore because it's just been way too much. And so we can recognize this chronic freeze state by a number of things: our thoughts, our physical health symptoms, emotions, relationship. Are we leaning in and actually engaging and trying to communicate, or are we checked out? We trying to disconnect and trying to distance ourselves.
And as you said, we're throwing a lot out there really quickly, but we've got a very sophisticated audience that, if they've been around here on these Facebook Lives for a while, they've had to put up with me, and and we're always geeking out one way or another. And so I'm sure people are following this, and it's not that you have to have all of these, but any version of it. The epigenetics for survival, the hormones that your body is producing for survival, determine which genes get turned on and which genes get turned off. So when you do the baby step little things, like you find out what foods are not good for me, is my immune system fighting dairy? Is my immune system fighting wheat? Well, I like wheat and I like dairy. Yeah, but your immune system says it's a problem. And it's causing more inflammation. And as you learn and you reduce the amount of inflammation of the things you have control over, you start to be able to turn down the dimmer switch of some of the survival genes. And when I see a patient who has a pretty nasty autoimmune thing going on, it doesn't matter which one it is, I tell them it's going to take 1 year to 2 years. I mean, you'll start feeling a little bit better right away, but it's going to take a couple of years, because when your health is going down the hill, the boulder running downhill, there is no way to do this. There's no pill, there's no drug that's going to do, there's no therapy that's going to do that. All you can do is taper it, plateau it out, slow it down, and then slowly raise it. And then you can start going up, right? And so it's all the little things you do, the baby steps that start to hit at this thing and taper the momentum of the downward spiral. We call it going down the rabbit hole, and so when you, to get out of that rabbit hole, it's all the little things. Well, I really like pizza, but I'm going to order a salad instead. It's all the little things you do that will make a huge difference globally, not in that day, but overall. The more things you do, the baby steps you do, there's nothing that's as powerful, in my opinion, as the understanding, the real deep understanding. And this is how I always sign books. It's the same thing. The person's name, and then the message is: base hits win the ball game. There is nothing more powerful when you want to stop this than base hits. The little things you do that will eventually win the ball game for you.
It's the small things that are actually the big decisions. That's
right. They're the big decisions in the moment that it's requiring your energy to decide: should I have pasta or should I have a salad and a piece of fish? Oh man, I really want the pasta, but I'm going to have a salad and a piece of fish. Okay. And it's all those little things that will make such a huge difference. Let me do a few more shout outs here. Jillian says hi from Cleveland. Thea says hello. Steph's in Missouri. Jennifer's in Virginia Beach. Allison's in New Jersey. Mary's in rainy Atlanta. Thea says, congrats, Tom. Thank you, Thea. Maggie's in Cleveland. Kim says, is it normal to occasionally have dreams about traumatic events or people we associate with trauma?
That's a really great question. And this is where, when it comes to trauma and stored trauma, anything is normal, right? Anything is normal. The body is an incredible machine. And oftentimes what's coming up in either your thoughts or even your dreams are things that your body is ready to process. It's ready to go back there and do some resolution so that it's no longer affecting your health in a negative way.
You know, I've had that experience so many times when I was in clinical practice in Chicago, seeing patients on a daily basis. I'd make an adjustment or I'd stimulate some reflex points and the person would start crying.
Exactly.
Tears.
Yes. Yeah.
Are you okay? Are you okay? Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, doctor. I was just thinking about my dad, you know, and he died so suddenly, and then they just start sobbing. And it's great. They're letting go. If you're having these dreams on occasion of some trauma, it may mean that your psyche is ready to maybe start embracing this and to put your toe in the water consciously of how to deal with it. And would I be on the right track with that, Dr. Aimie?
That's been my experience. Yep. And when I work with people, especially on the trauma piece, right? Usually they come to me for their physical health, and I am integrating the trauma work from day one with them. And I find usually that 21 days of very consistent daily exercises, what are somatic body-based exercises to track their nervous system and redirect it back to parasympathetic with some very simple basic exercises. 21 days of consistently doing that. And then their body is ready to resolve a whole bunch of stuff. And they don't need to go looking for it. They don't need to go, in the closet and start throwing out stuff. And, where's that memory of my dad or my mom or, this? It'll come to you. It'll come to you while you're on the chiropractic table. It'll come to you while you're sleeping. It'll come to you, and you can trust the wisdom of your body to know when it's ready for something.
Now, what about people who are thinking, as you're saying that, I don't want this memory to come back. I bury that. I don't want that.
Yeah. I mean, that was me for a lot of my life. And that's what was a big final contributing factor to enough oxidative stress and inflammation accumulating in my body that I finally had my health crash. And this is again, an adaptation that our body has had in order to help us survive. And we're not going to be ready to do any of this work until we are in a safe, supportive environment where we have the tools, we have the support, and then we do it like you said just a few minutes ago, right? Like dip our toe in the water. That is how we start. And especially with the work that I do, I am not a proponent of let's go to the story, let's talk about the story. I have not found that helpful. And in fact, I have found that more hurtful in more circumstances, because as we try to analyze something, it's still just in our logical mind. It's not actually the felt experience of the body. It's not actually the nervous system and the overwhelm, the fear, the grief, all of that, our survival system went through in that moment. And that's what we need to support as we rewire that. And so I don't go into the stories at all. We don't need to do that in order to do the work. We just get to work with the nervous system. And again, simplifying it to, hey, you've got 3 states of your nervous system. Which state are you in right now? And what do we need to do to get you back to parasympathetic, or at least closer to parasympathetic? And usually in that process, sometimes a memory will come up, kind of like your client on the table, right? Like we're doing this work and then all of a sudden there's tears. Well, why the tears? I don't know. We don't need to know why. Like that's part of the beautiful thing of the body. We don't have to go back into the story itself. We just go into the body.
Just let it go. Let it go.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's actually profound. I'm sitting here thinking, I didn't know about this kind of work. I've not heard this before. But
Mhm.
Dr. Aimie did over 3 years of training in
Mhm.
somatic medicine so that she
Yep.
could do this work. And it just
Mhm.
reminded me, well, if you want to be certified in functional medicine, it's a 3 year training program. So, and then those people know, they
Right.
know. And
Yep.
so you put your attention in this world of trauma resolution.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
it's a 3 year training program after your MD, after
Yes,
your
exactly.
first board
Yeah.
certifications. Way to go on that. So
Well,
Allison
that
has
was
the
actually how I found functional medicine too, Dr. Tom. So
uh,
I was at a point where I was overwhelmed, I was anxious, I was depressed, I was even having suicidal thoughts as I would drive home from work. And what if I just drove off the bridge? And I was like, all right, I've got to do something. I've got to do something. This is out of control. I can't just be focused on my work. I actually have to pay attention to my mental health at the moment. And I found myself stuck and I could not get out of it. I actually was put on 2 antidepressants. And that's how I found functional medicine, was like, wait a second, this isn't working. And I'm not able to shift out of these trauma patterns that I've started to recognize in myself. I was on an autoimmune pathway. My autoimmune markers were really high, already had early signals of multiple sclerosis, and I didn't want to be on that. So that's how I found functional medicine. And this bridging of the two worlds has been a tremendous gift for me. And it's allowed me to do what I do now. And it's like, yes, we need to deal with trauma, right? But it doesn't need to take years. Like, we really can accelerate the healing journey when we can bring the biology piece into it and really provide the environment around the nervous system for it to feel safe, for it to enhance its neuroplasticity. We don't have to do years and years of therapy to get over and rewire and readapt ourselves. We just have to have the tools to be able to do it more efficiently.
that's well said. Well said. Allison asked the question. It's the $1 million question. How do you retrain your nervous system and mind to reset and change the reactions?
Yes, this is a great question, Allison. Thank you. So in rewiring, again, when we're seeing the patterns that someone is either going into sympathetic all the time, right? They're high stress, they're hypervigilant, they have a hard time sleeping, a hard time shutting their brain off, or they're on the opposite spectrum where they're tired all the time. They don't want to get out of bed. They feel exhausted. They feel themselves disconnected. They feel like they're going through their life, their day in just a fog, a daze. They're going through the motions, but there's not much joy. There's not happiness there anymore. What we need to do is we need to rewire the nervous system and bring it to parasympathetic. And these are done through some, what I would consider basic exercises that are body based. So when we talk about the nervous system is our safety versus survival programming, but it also runs everything in our body, even down to our muscles, right? So our brain has a thought of, I want to move my left arm, and it travels down a nerve and it moves my left arm. That is also our nervous system. So we get to work directly with our nervous system through movement and through the different body sensations. So where we start with rewiring is actually recognizing what are the different sensations that you're having in your body right now. And that would be a question, Allison, that I would kind of put out to you, right? Like, what is a body sensation that you're having right now? Many people, when they have these trauma patterns, they feel that their chest is tight. They're breathing fine, right? It's not like their oxygen saturations are low, but their chest just feels tight, or they may have a lump in their throat. For many people who have a lot of insecurities from childhood, they constantly feel this pain, this knot in their stomach. They may feel completely disconnected from everything below their waist. And that's really part of the chronic freeze, because the vagus nerve really only innervates down through the digestive system in the pelvis. It doesn't go down to your legs. And so when a person is in this chronic functional freeze state, they are more disconnected from their legs. They may not even really feel their feet. So that would be something like I ask people, do you even really feel your feet right now? And then we do exercises to bring their whole body into a state where they're having a deep, spontaneous breath. So there are specific exercises, movements, maybe could call them movements, that I teach in all of my programs, where it will elicit this shift of your nervous system from the freeze or sympathetic into a more parasympathetic state. And the reason how we know that it is making that shift a deep spontaneous breath, a yawn, and sometimes people even feel like stomach gurgling because their stomach and the intestines are turning back on. So they'll get a little gurgling in their stomach, or they'll feel a softening of their chest, their stomach. Their chest now feels more open, more expansive. They feel like they've got lots of room to breathe. And so this is something where, my goodness, I feel like I could talk to you guys forever. There's so much to share with you.
Let me comment on that. That I've not heard of this therapy before, but it is so obvious. It's right on the money. And in a few minutes, people, we're going to talk about the event that Dr. Aimie is hosting. But for now, we're just going to stay in this dance that we're doing. And I was sitting here thinking, oh, you know, if we're at a seminar together, I'd love to do a dance with you. You know, go dancing after the long day. You have dinner, and if there's a band playing, so you know, let's do a little dancing, because I'm sure your body is very creative and expressive now.
Now, not before.
Yeah, I understand. I understand. So I received a response to my question about where is that island, and Helen says Koh Samui is an island in the south of Thailand. And I thought immediately, oh, good, let's do a seminar there in 2024. Let's go to the island in the south of Thailand. I was born in a country at war in Africa. So yes, I know how displacement and war can make a person be higher vigilant. I've been through a lot of adaptations. My autoimmune is from stress and this past trauma. So I moved to an island and I'm losing weight and put my thyroid issues into balance naturally. Way to go, Helen. Way to go. High five, girl. Come on, put your hand up there. High five. Way to go. Way to go. That's exactly what may be needed. And thank you for modeling what we're talking about here. This is really quite remarkable on your part that you're doing that. Connie says, holding his head up is a day to remember, as is every day. He's Dr. Tom's son, so he has no other choice than to be unique. Super smart, caring, and handsome little boy. And your wife's intelligent, funny, love to hear her talk, pretty, and the list goes on. Your family's such a blessing. Oh, thank you so much. That's very kind of you, Connie. Thank you. Lucia is here from Tucson. Gwendolyn says, I was adopted at 6 weeks and then put into the hospital age 2 with rheumatoid arthritis, spending most of the next 9 years in a hospital. As a result, I never had a deep bonding with my family, never felt safe, and have a hard time trusting people throughout my life. That's really great. Clearly, Gwendolyn, you've done a lot of work to understand this dynamic of what's going on for you. Clearly you have, which is really great. Congratulations. And it sounds like some of it, like you never quite feel right. It sounds like this somatic work may be exactly what you need. You know, doing this physical stuff in your own pace, putting your toe in the water, your own time. Dr. Aimie, do you want to comment on this, this comment from Gwendolyn?
Absolutely. This is something where I would really encourage you to be gentle with your system, but also be persistent. And so whenever you notice yourself getting into a place of insecurity, fear, anxiety, being able to find ways to shift. And one thing that I'll just tell you right now, your feet are an amazing resource for you. And putting some pretty hard pressure right in the middle of your feet. There's so many nerve endings right there. Sometimes for many people, that's a great place to start. And you'll notice yourself shifting. You'll notice your thoughts starting to calm down, slow down, and being able to shift back into a more parasympathetic state. So that might be a place that you can easily get started with, play around with it, experiment with it, see if that's a gentle way for you to begin doing some of this body work or somatic work.
You know, when I had my practice in Chicago, we always had 6 massage therapists, all working part-time, but always massage therapists, and they were doing therapeutic massage, not just rub-a-dub-dub, which is really nice, but therapeutic massage. One of them was a foot reflexologist. And when she would work on my feet, it's heaven on earth. Because there are so many, you know, the geeks like Dr. Aimie and I, if we were to draw the human body as the brain sees it, in terms of where are all the nerves, that you have hands that are 3 to 4 times the size, hands and feet that are 3 to 4 times the size of the proportions that we normally think for the rest of the body, because your hands and feet have so many nerve endings.
Yep.
And when I would have the foot reflexology treatments, I always felt like a different person afterwards. It's remarkable, and I never would have thought with this type of example, the questions from our viewers here. Well, foot reflexology is, foot massages, and that's a really good idea. Now, in my home in Chicago, I haven't had it since then, but I had a vibrating plate under the desk. So I'm sitting at my desk working. I put my feet up on it. It had those little knobby things in there. And you push the button with your toe and it goes like that.
Yep. I've got that right underneath my desk here, Dr. Tom. So I know that's why I'm like, yep, you and me alike. So I've got my vibration plate that I will use, but I also have an acupressure mat. And I will take the pillow portion of that and curl my feet around that when I'm sitting here working, especially when I'm doing some of these calls where there's bright lights on me and it starts to wear down my nervous system. And I have a pretty strong pull towards that freeze response and just getting overwhelmed, my nervous system getting overwhelmed and kind of shutting out. And so I will wrap my feet around that. And boy, does it bring me right back. It brings me right back into the present moment, into parasympathetic state.
And I would say, when you first start with something like that, you may not notice a change.
Right.
Or it may just be a little bit, but accumulatively over time, you build up more messaging to calm down, relax now. Let's just take it easy here. You know, the vibrations on your feet. I mean, it's such a great idea. I miss my foot reflexology treatment. I truly do. Allison asks, can constant stress and trauma cause the stomach to create a hiatal hernia?
This is a really great question. So there, on my last summit, I did a summit back in October, and I interviewed a Dr. Aileen LaPierre, and she is founder of Neuroaffective Touch. And what we went over in that interview was exactly this kind of thing, where the nervous system coming out of early childhood and what that experience was like for that baby. Was there enough touch? Was it the right kind of touch? Was it loving touch, or was it more aggressive and disciplinary touch? All of those things affect the development of a nervous system to the point where it develops into our posture. It develops into our muscular skeletal tissues and strength, or in some places laxity. And so we went over into the different types of muscle tone and patterns in the musculature that will indicate certain types of insecurities, certain types of traumas, certain types of things at key events or time points in a person's life. So this would be something where absolutely, and especially as we're talking about the vagus nerve and how important the vagus nerve is for the whole stomach and the whole digestive system, imbalances in that vagus nerve from going back and forth between sympathetic and freeze response could definitely cause some structural changes in the tissues.
You bet. The answer is yes. Absolutely yes. It may contribute to the hiatal hernia. Karen asked the question, can you please tell me of a place near Charlotte, North Carolina that I could receive services for my trauma?
So I think that what Dr. Tom and I are really talking about as well is not just trauma, but bringing in the biology piece as well, right? Because they're one and the same. Trauma is not just our psychology, it's become our biology. So just as important as doing trauma work is doing the biology work and all of the stuff that Dr. Tom preaches at you guys all the time. I don't want that to be diminished because that is crucial. A nervous system will not rewire if it has ongoing food sensitivities and signals of danger coming internally. We have to create both an external environment and an internal environment that promotes safety. So once we've got that piece, right, let's not forget that piece, what to do about the trauma piece. So this is where you can find a somatic experiencing practitioner. You can also find online programs like the ones that I offer where you can learn this stuff for yourself. And especially coming out of this last year with the pandemic, for me, that was a huge motivating factor for creating a specific online program for people with health conditions who could learn these tools for themselves because they weren't able to get out. They couldn't go to see a therapist. And even if they were able to, it's, well, I'll see you next week. And what am I going to do in between now and next week? Right? Like I'm going to be
right. This thing about, well, I'll see you once a week. That's
right.
just a
That
convenience.
is not going to work.
There's
Yeah.
no rationality to that. You know, Carl Jung, when he'd see a client 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for 30 days.
Yeah.
And then say, okay, you're done.
Right.
And when do I come back?
Yep.
You don't. Yeah, you
Right.
don't. You
Right.
understand dynamics now. Now just go put your toe in the water and
Now
stay.
implement it. Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll give you the link, everyone, for
Yeah.
Dr. Amy's programs
Mm-hmm.
and so that you can review those.
Mm-hmm.
Liz says, hello from the UK, Dr. Tom. Love your Facebook Live interviews. Hey, Liz, thanks so much. Thanks for being here and staying up late. I know it's late there for you right now, so thank you. Cynthia says, Dr. Annie Hopper's DNRS and Dr. John Connolly's rapid resolution therapy has helped me personally. Well, that's great, Cynthia. Congratulations. Sally's here from Australia. Bert says, just joining from Richland, Washington. Interesting conversation. I noticed there were notes regarding adoption. I too was adopted at an early age, straight out of the hospital. Apparently, I need to view the first part of this live. Well, no, you'll be able to go back and watch it. You know, all of our Facebook Lives are available on Facebook afterwards. So there's nothing you've missed. Mary Agnes, our own Mary Agnes at theDr.com says, great conversation. Thank you. Can Dr. Aimie explain somatic for those who might not know what that term means?
Somatic is the fancy scientific term for anything related to the actual body and the tissues. And so when we talk about somatic work, we're actually working with the body, we're working with the tissues, we're working with the cells. And so that would be something like a body worker, something like a massage therapist, right? Like those are people working with the somatics, with that level of the body. That would just be in contrast to psychology, where it's just all your thoughts. And the somatic is really referring to working with the actual tissues and the systems of the body.
Thanks, M.A., for asking that question. Mary says, oh goodness, can relate to the crying, Dr. Tom. First visit to homeopathic practitioner for me. I cried for the entire session. Yep. Saba says, hello from sunny Arizona. Great conversation. Kathleen Cousins is watching. Mary says, can you elaborate on deep spontaneous breath? I feel like I do that every so often, like a sigh.
So great question, Mary. And I would want to differentiate between a deep spontaneous breath and a sigh, because sometimes, and not that this is happening for you, but sometimes a sigh is more a giving in, a giving up, an exhausted sigh, rather than a deep spontaneous breath, which is full capacity, where your shoulders are coming back and you feel more open, you feel more alive, versus a sigh that sometimes a sigh can, like you feel that collapse of your structure. Your shoulders come down, you're starting to cower over your stomach. So that would be the difference between a deep spontaneous breath where you actually feel expansion and aliveness versus a sigh that may be more of a collapse.
Thank you.
That would be the freeze response. Mm-hmm.
Teresa says, how did you change your course towards autoimmune disease? I live in Waco, Texas, have several autoimmune diseases. The first one I started out with was MS, which I've had for 30 years. And I'm going to answer this one. Teresa, read my book, The Autoimmune Fix. It won the National Book Award. Not because I'm such a great person, but because it's a really good book. And you'll understand the development of autoimmune diseases and the step-by-step progression of what has occurred for you, which includes the emotional side of health. Yep. The trauma that you may have experienced is a very important component. It's not exclusive that alone causes it, but rather it's a component. And when you read the Autoimmune Fix, you get the big picture and you'll understand what the next step is. The other thing is that we did a docuseries called Betrayal, the autoimmune disease solution they're not telling you. And we've had close to 1 million people now who have watched it in the last 4 years. And it's at our website, theDr.com /betrayal, and it's free. And we interviewed the world leaders I mean, the geeks, the scientists, because I've read their papers. And Marcy and I went to Spain. We went to Portugal. We went to England. We went to Italy. We interviewed the great researchers, and then we interviewed the doctors like Dr. Aimie and myself who were implementing what these researchers were writing about. And then we interviewed the patients of these doctors, compliant, following their recommendations, reversing their MS, reversing their lupus, reversing their chronic depression or their chronic fatigue, again and again and again. And you see this, and it's all free. It's at theDr.com /betrayal. And so read the book, The Autoimmune Fix, and watch Betrayal. Then you'll have the big picture of what's necessary to begin addressing the autoimmune conditions that you have. And for the emotional side, I'm going to be a strong proponent now of Dr. Amy's work, because it just makes so much sense. I never knew about it. It just makes so much sense. Tina's watching. Shanquilla says, hi, I've had chronic neck stiffness and dizziness. My craniosacral therapist said trauma could be the cause. Just a minute, I lost it. Where did it go? Trauma could be the cause. I lost the rest of it there. So
trauma could be caused. Have you ever heard of this before?
Yes.
All right. Yes, absolutely. So this is actually something that's quite common. So you're not alone in this at all. And there's two things that I'll share with you. One would be a physical trauma to the neck, because the vagus nerve comes out of the brainstem and it runs right in the neck. And so when you've got a physical injury to the trauma, a physical trauma to the neck, then it can actually cause impingement on the vagus nerve and make you more predisposed to going into overwhelm because of that physical impingement on the nerve. Those
are car accidents.
Those are car accidents. That's whiplash.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yes. The other thing that I will share with you is that when there's been emotional trauma and the body has been feeling very awful, right? And so when we go through an experience, even as little babies or young kids, when we go through experiences, it's the body that starts to feel ugly. It's the body that feels bad, right? When you think of grief, you think of the heavy heart, you think of body sensations that are uncomfortable. It's not the emotion itself, it's how that emotion expresses itself in your body. And what the body does to adapt, like we started this conversation about adapting, what the body does to adapt is it cuts off that message. It cuts off that communication from the body of, I feel terrible, please do something about it. And so one way in which the body adapts is it tightens up the neck, pulls up the shoulders, and that's a way of cutting off the messages coming up from the body through the vagus nerve. So that would be the other reason in which chronic neck stiffness and then dizziness may be related to emotional trauma, not just physical trauma.
Cynthia says, been wondering lately if a traumatic childhood where a child is too afraid to be present can lead to becoming an adult finding it extremely hard to focus.
100%.
Yeah, okay. Maggie asks, does constant vertigo have anything to do with the vagus nerve?
It can. It's not the only thing that can lead to that, but it can be one of the many things that leads to the constant vertigo. Absolutely.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Marie's here hello from upstate New York. I suffer from constant back pain. Can this be due to inflammation? And is the best way a gluten-free, dairy-free diet? What else may help? Do you have an hour? There's so much to say. You know, when you have a chronic condition, neck pain, vertigo, back pain, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, losing your hair, thyroid, when you have a chronic condition, you have to understand that the mechanism of all of that stems from inflammation. And inflammation can come from what's on the end of your fork. It can come from what you're breathing. It can come from the stress hormones your body's producing because there's stored trauma inside of you. There are many different sources of the fire inside your body that always, without exception, always is a primary component to chronic diseases and chronic conditions. It's always this way. There's no magic pill that fixes this, but if you understand the big picture, then you realize, oh, wow, I'm so much better than I used to be, but you know, I'm only at 80%. And I never thought about the trauma when I was a child, how that might affect me. This might be something I need to look into. So you put your toe in the water of this trauma work and you see, you know, but that's the way you have to do. Oh, well, I like my pizza. I don't have a problem with gluten, but Dr. Tom says everyone has a problem with gluten. And I never say everyone needs to give up gluten, but if you have a condition you're dealing with, everyone needs to be checked accurately to see if your immune system is fighting gluten. And that's the wheat zoomer. We'll put the link in here for the wheat zoomer. So the concept here is that you have to take a step back and look at where's the gasoline coming from that's fueling the fire. And tonight's talk is about trauma. And it's such a great, great conversation because this doctor has dialed it down. She has spent years studying this. She's lived it. It's in her genes. Her grandparents hid. They buried themselves in the sand to hide from being assassinated, right? So it's in her genes. So no one that I know of is going to be more of an expert on this topic than someone like Dr. Aimie. That's the bottom line. So let's talk about the summit that you've been working on and what is this event, and we'll post the link here. So let's just talk about that for a minute.
Well, of course, you are a speaker on my summit, and there are over 40 interviews of topics all around the biology of trauma. And so I really dive deep into showing people and helping people understand biology is really where we need to focus in terms of trauma. Even if we're talking about the trauma therapy works because it's changing the biology, not because it's working on some superficial level or our brain. No, like the trauma therapies that are effective are actually changing the physiology. They're changing the biology on a cellular level, on a DNA level, on an epigenetic level. And that's really where it's going to stick, because otherwise you can stay in therapy, you can go to yoga, and as soon as you get off that yoga mat, you're kind of back in, you know, your fears and insecurities and anxieties and all of that. So we really want to understand, okay, I understand that trauma gets stored in the body. It's even part of our DNA at times. And what are the tools? What are the solutions that I have that I can empower myself to actually change the outcome of my future and the future of my children?
You know, I can't, for those that haven't signed off, and so they're interested in this topic and they're here, I can't tell you how important, yes, I can. I don't need to say that. Yes, I can. This is really important to understand about how our bodies store. If you're a child, you don't have the skill set to deal with the emotional trauma that's coming at you. So you find a way to survive. You find a way to survive, right? And that is not going to go away. But how your body responds to that survival mechanism is what can change.
Yes.
I mean, I'm always going to be looking as I'm walking up towards an alley. Is there someone in there? Is there someone in that doorway? I'm always going to be protecting my family. That's just it's my DNA. It's not going to go away. But I don't walk around stressed up anymore like I did in my 20s. When I lived in a martial arts school in Japan, I was a deshi learning how to be a badass, right? Because I had this DNA inside of me. Now I'm just this mush of mashed potatoes, you know, and just goo-gooing with my son every day and with my wife. And I'm just so grateful to have understood, and over the years, just keep putting your toe in the water, keep putting your toe in the water, keep doing it again and again. Because every time you do, the soul inside of you gets a little stronger. Your heart becomes a little more solid, out closer to the surface to be felt by you and to be expressive through your interactions with others. You get more heart. Everybody's got heart. But as you deal with these stored traumas that you didn't have a skill set to deal with at the time, so they got buried inside of you. And as you learn and put your toe in the water, you have more heartfelt energy, more love for those, for yourself first, and then for those around you. So we'll put the link here for the biology of trauma. Everyone should register tonight for this thing. Can they register now?
They can, and there's actually 3 talks that are already available for them if they register now. And one of them is on with Peter Levine, and the founder of the somatic experiencing that we've been talking about today. So it would be a great way for them to learn even what this is and the introduction to somatic experiencing, and they can access that now. Yeah.
Marvelous, marvelous. So the link is here for you. I'm sure the staff has already put it there. And I recommend everyone register for this thing. And you may watch 2 or 3 interviews out of 48, did you say?
It ended up being about 45.
45. You may watch 2 or 3. It's free. And that 2 or 3 that you watch may change your life. It may completely change your life, because now you have an understanding of a direction that you want to go in. So with that, Dr. Aimie, we're already 10 minutes over. You know, it just goes so fast. You know, it always goes so, and I'm sorry that we couldn't get to all the questions. You know, there's so many, and we'll be back next week. And some of these, if your questions are burning next week, put them back in here, and hopefully I can get to them for you. Dr. Aimie, thank you so much for being with us tonight. It's really a pleasure to spend this time with you. And I look forward to shaking it up on a dance floor with you.
That's going to be amazing. I love it.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.